Extraordinary conversation with our next guest, who is Vince Thompson, the CEO of Melt, an Atlanta-based sports marketing firm that has really been a trailblazer in this country. And Vince, you've been at the vanguard of this naming and licensing conversation. And at the time, I think our last conversation, it had not been resolved. Still not sure it's resolved. But we're closer.
It's still evolving. The NCAA certainly took a little air out of the balloon, but I'm not sure there's any resolution, and certainly not any resolution with Tua's name and image and likeness as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was talking to some people the other day in New York, and the idea that had Tua had we turned the clock back for the sake of argument, and 2 years ago Tua throws the walk-off second in 26 at the Mercedes Dome. What kind of money could he have made?
Well, the short answer is lots. Because you've got this quintessential kid, incredible story, incredible heart, incredible family, comes to the mainland from Hawaii, incredible sportsman. And by the way, you forget the story with him and Jalen at the time as well.
Right.
So he throws the walk-off bomb, millions, because then he would have been on the cover of EA, NCAA the next year.
Right.
The image and likeness, and not to mention he's got one of the greatest, most marketable names of all time. But let's talk about going forward, the business impact of Tua. Does he come back to Alabama? Does he go to the NFL? Is he a reclamation project, third or fourth round? It could be 30, 40, 50, $100 million at stake.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because everyone gets hung up on first round money, which is not great.
No.
But Tua, to me, and this is where you are the expert, it seems like he could be such a marketable person. And I wonder, even more so now, if he comes back and is successful.
Oh, totally not. I mean, if you look at the amount of sympathy that he received across the nation,
amazing,
and you look at how he handled this, and you look at how he's handled everything, all the adversity,
right,
even back to the Jalen, I would tell you that he's going to be one of the most marketable NFL players to come out probably since maybe Peyton.
Wow.
Far beyond Baker, far beyond Kyler.
So are we going to see Tua and Brad Paisley on those Nationwide commercials now?
You might. And but he fits a lot of really, really good profiles. I mean, you look at Zion, you look at LeBron. Not many solo baseball players, but if I were his, depending on the outcome of his recovery, if I were his, running his marketing, I'd say look seriously at coming back to the University of Alabama for lots of reasons. Not to least mention the fact that, your teammates at the SEC have some new television things going on.
I've read about that
as well. It means what it
means.
A
lot is in the media these days.
There's a lot in the media. CBS and their rights are in play. Right now they're paying around $50 million annually. My estimation is that'll go up to $500 million. Which means, and by the way, don't forget, you and I talked about these numbers before the SEC network in the billions, and we were $2 to $5 billion. This one will probably be a 20-year, $10 billion contract in my estimation. And it may be CBS, it may be the mothership Disney, it may be Fox, and it may be an outlier like a Tim Cook or Mark Zuckerberg.
Man, now you're talking my language.
So that bodes well. Live sports is still the greatest destination for eyeballs.
So, I mean, listen, you just alluded to two companies that no one has really ever conventionally thought about in terms of Apple and Facebook, and there are many. I mean, that is where the growth is right now in sports, is it not?
It's massive. I mean, look, Amazon can pay anything they want.
Yeah.
Apple can pay anything they want. Facebook can pay anything they want. And you're forgetting, too, that also with Disney coming out with Disney Plus and ESPN Plus and these giant over-the-top streaming platforms, you're looking at reach to 2, 3, 4 billion people, not 100 million households that have cable television.
Okay.
So that's why live sports. Now, here's another thing. How much of a financial impact will the twilight of Nick Saban's career have on the value of the next SEC television deal?
I'm going to guess that somebody is saying to Nick Saban, we need you to stay.
I'd say that more than one person is saying to Nick, we need to stay. And arguably, I've run numbers that Nick is probably 30 to 40% of the value of the existing SEC broadcast agreements now. So there's a lot of incentive for a lot of us for him to say for him to stay. And obviously, I went to Auburn. It pains me sometimes to say that, but even with what's going on,
you're driven by the dollar, so we understand.
Yeah, well, yeah, my school color's green, right? So, but so it's going to be. We live in fascinating times with what's going on and how that intersects with name, image, and likeness. How that intersects with a new SEC deal. How that intersects with Tua's recovery, Saban's retirement. There is a lot of unbelievable.
I want to go back to Tua because I've made this argument against, but I must tell you I've never thought about what you're talking about. So if you had to, if I could sit you down and Tua, by the way, ride back in Tuscaloosa today. He's there to support his teammates tomorrow on Senior Day. Mm-hmm. If you were to sit down with him and say, Tua, this is why you should stay in school one more year, what would your most salient argument be?
Well, there's several of them. First of all, is that the recovery and the pace of the recovery is going to drive a lot of that.
Okay.
Because there is a big gap from being a first rounder to the third and fourth rounder.
Of course.
That'll drive a lot of the discussion. If the recovery is not on the pace, I would say, hey, we don't have a lot to lose by coming back. Okay. It's a great sympathy story. Alabama's had a ton of injuries this year. They'll reload. Don't forget, we've got a $100 million stadium expansion going on in Alabama as well.
But Tua is still not profiting from any of that.
No, he's not, unless we're able to get some modifications in the name, image, and likeness. That's why it's really such a dynamic issue now. If you look at the intersection of all of these issues, and we're kind of picking on Alabama. Obviously, there's a lot of other big institutions, but this seems to be sort of the perfect storm and the perfect timing to create the perfect storm.
It's a lot to chew on there.
But I think it's probably it means that SEC football, and it means college football, is very alive and well, and is probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon. If you stack our ratings up against, say, the NBA, the LSU-Alabama game had the highest number that CBS has had in 8 years. And millions and millions of viewers. And so that tells
you. It was an afternoon game still.
And it was an afternoon game. Yeah. And so
what would that game have done in prime time?
It would have done north of 20 million viewers, 20 to 25 million. And you think about, the Super Bowl gets, a couple hundred million.
Yeah, just for an example, the Fox game last night, I think, did about 13 million. That's a Monday night, Thursday night, 12 to 15 million is pretty average, right?
Right.
Now we'll say the game Sunday between the Patriots and the Cowboys will break the bank, will it not?
Oh, it'll be near. It won't be near Super Bowl, but it certainly will be near playoff and conference championship.
That's the biggest game of the year in pro football.
The biggest game of the year. The thing about the health of college football, and you and I keep coming back to this, and obviously there's legal betting now, there's fantasy, there's going to be EA is going to come back, but it's evergreen in its passion. The interesting phenomenon now about the venues is now there's an arms race to improve the venues. Right. Look at what's here, look at what's Alabama. But when I was in Auburn last weekend, the other phenomenon is a lot of people are actually staying outside and watching the game while the game's going on in the stadium. So that's a whole nother. There were thousands of people.
I had a guy in our studio Wednesday in New York who's the head of sports for Twitter, Georgia graduate, by the way. And he was talking about all this stuff, and it was mind-blowing. And none of this would be surprising because you've been in these conversations, but people at home and in their cars just don't realize what's going on.
Truly, they don't. And like I said, we left the game a little early, and there must have been at least 10,000 people. Because the sophistication of the tailgate experience, you can get these mobile satellites, you're sitting in a comfortable chair, you're switching channels.
Now, why are people doing that?
I think it's more, football now. The tailgating is the evolution of the tailgating is more of a social occasion. You go inside the stadium, maybe somebody's standing in front of you. You can't get a cold beer. I mean, those types of things. So the balance and the evolution. I had lunch today with Ross Bjork, the athletic director of Texas A&M, and you know what they've done at Kyle Field.
Oh, amazing.
I mean, it's but when you looked at Greg Burns' announcement, the Alabama AD, about what they were evolving the Alabama stadium, they were comparing it to Jerry's World and Mercedes-Benz. So the wake-up call is rippling through college athletic directors with the venue, and that's why I think you'll see a younger group of ADs: Alan Green, Greg Byrne, Ross Bjork, Carter at Ole Miss. They understand the nuance of the social media culture and the technology culture and the name, image, and likeness culture better, and I think you'll see a sea shift over the next few months. And college football won't look like it does in 5 years, anything like today.
Nobody better on the cutting edge of where sports is going than our guest, Vince Thompson, the president and CEO and founder of Melt. Come back soon, Vince. This is an extraordinary conversation.
Thank you, Paul.
Vince Thompson joining us. Kirby Smart is 15 minutes.
You can look right now, and I guarantee you, if Alabama weren't Alabama, they would be where I've put them. But Alabama, because they're the brand, will be in the 5th position probably until they lose to Auburn, if they lose to Auburn. I don't see Alabama moving at all. And I know you had your data guy, your metrics guy on earlier today, and I know they've created a lot of jobs with this new college football playoff who's in thing up in Bristol. But when I start hearing this or that team has this lower percentage of chance of getting in or this higher percentage chance of getting in, Paul, from my vantage point, that just allows for the committee to continue to play the brand game. And it also allows much of the media to say, why should I care about Utah and Oregon? They have a 0.87% chance of getting in if they win out. Therefore, I don't have to care. It promotes laziness in the media. That's what it does. Albeit with a different set of circumstances and an offense and a quarterback like LSU's now that could probably be in a better position. But again, the rest of the country is going to go, really? We got to see that again? We got to see Alabama and LSU again? Oh, by the way, I believe at that time, Paul, Bill Hancock wouldn't even let us use the word playoff until that game happened. Then all of a sudden his office became named the playoff office. So that's what we're looking at, and that's why the branding matters and pure playoff privilege and all of that. The loss of Tua Tagovailoa, a lot of people were suggesting automatically. I mean, as soon as the game was over, oh, they're done, that's it. What? Huh? Are you kidding me? No way. This only enhances the Alabama narrative if they can go and boat race Auburn at Auburn, puts them in a great position, and if LSU does what it's supposed to do and beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, Alabama, in my opinion, will be in. They will absolutely be in. And the rest of the country, too bad. Here we go again. Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State would be your other team, another one of the playoff privileged, who, by the way, got in without having to win its Big Ten championship one year, much to the chagrin of Penn State. So they fall into that category as well. Brand names, Paul, all about branding. And Alabama is the poster child for the pure playoff privilege, no doubt about it. Georgia's one of them, too. Georgia lost to a third-string quarterback at home, and it didn't matter.
Welcome back to the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
We are back. Kirby Smart is coming up here in just a few minutes. But this isn't a warm-up act. This is Laura Rutledge joining us.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally a warm-up act. But basically, they were like, you know what, we got to fill a little bit of time till the main act gets here. I'm like, the Jonas Brothers opening for James Taylor. That was for you.
I had to do that once. It was some corporate event, and they had like a really big speaker, and they asked me to come at 7 o'clock, and It was a happy hour, and I mean, I literally was like talking, and not one person was listening.
People are having their own conversations, and you're just
I just started mumbling.
Anything. Well, exactly.
Which I normally do anyway.
It wasn't really a departure from the usual for you, but that's here's the thing. I'm going to try to say the most outlandish things that I can to see if I can somehow upstage Kirby Smart.
I'm listening.
I can't think of any, so moving along. Paul, do you think the weather is really going to be as bad tomorrow as people are talking about?
Well,
I hate to make this about the weather, but
the forecast is pretty grim.
Yeah, I think that factors into the game more than people are talking about.
Here, I will tell you, there are some nervous dogs around here.
Really?
Yeah, there's just something about this. This is a game that just seemed. I mean, we've seen this game on the schedule for more than a year, and you say, "Wow, that could be a really interesting game."
Yeah.
And then it just kind of popped up because Georgia's had Florida, then at Auburn, and those are their two traditional rivals, and then they've had Notre Dame. And this game just like shows up, and you're like going, okay, do we know anything about Texas? We don't play Texas A&M.
Do you think it's more about A&M and Jimbo, or more about maybe Georgia fans feeling like their offense hasn't fully clicked on all cylinders yet? Their defense has been great, right? So you think it's more A&M Jimbo?
Well, I mean, listen,
waiting in the wings.
On this program, fans have already turned the page to the playoffs in Georgia and LSU in 2 weeks. And this is just
it's a sneaky one.
I mean, and all of a sudden, like A&M, okay, go to Athens, and then go to LSU.
Yeah. See how that goes for you. Right. Yeah, look, I mean, I really do think next year A&M is going to be a team that we're talking about at the very end, whether that's related to the SEC championship or at least being in the mix, maybe in the mix for the playoff. Who knows? Their schedule's manageable. What I would say about this game is I think this could be Georgia's opportunity to really have that dominant win that a lot of people seem to be waiting for. And I'm not saying that because, beating an A&M team right now would be a hugely dominant win.
Was this one of the things you were going to say to see if we were paying attention?
Exactly. You got me. But truly, this is a chance for them to say, look, A&M's got some talent. Let's put all the doubters aside and say, no, here we are. We're ready for the SEC championship. We're taking this seriously, and boom, boom, boom.
And then they have Georgia Tech next week.
Well, that was you saying an outlandish thing. Because Georgia Tech, listen, I feel bad because my dad is a Georgia Tech fan.
Right. And a heck of an engineer.
Yes, he is. Ramblin' wreck. I do think that Georgia Tech has the right guy. Jeff Collins is the right hire. Not to get off track here and talk about Georgia Tech, but this is not going to be the year that they beat Georgia.
No.
So Georgia, this is a chance tomorrow, in my mind, to say, look, let's put on a little bit of a beauty pageant for the committee and let that be fresh in their minds.
My argument, well, not argument, my response. Too many other people I'm arguing with right now.
Yeah, keep it clean here.
Would simply be Georgia doesn't have to put any airs on. All Georgia has to do is win out.
You're right. Why does it feel like, though, that maybe they do? It just seems maybe here's...
You're listening to those Pac-12 people too much.
I think that's right. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, and this is not what the committee necessarily does, but it's got to be in their heads, especially with some coaches on this committee. If you matched up, let's say, it's probably not going to be Georgia and Oregon that we're talking about battling it out for a spot, because at that point Georgia would have beat LSU if they're in the mix for this, and it wouldn't matter. But if you look at Georgia, they would beat the Pac-12 champion.
I think so.
Whether it's Oregon or Utah.
The interesting thing about Georgia is that before the season started, I had some of our colleagues whisper to me, I think they're better than Alabama.
Georgia, yeah.
And that was like is this the year for Georgia? And then they beat Notre Dame, and then they just didn't look very good after that, and they faded away pretty quickly with that embarrassing loss to South Carolina. And ever since then, it's been a struggle. They've won huge games.
That's the thing. I don't think we're giving them enough credit.
No.
To go on the road and beat Auburn, and look, they could have beat Auburn by a lot more.
Yeah.
They missed some opportunities there. To go on the road and do that, Auburn's a team that I think anybody who watches football would agree, and watches it with an intelligent eye, would agree that Auburn is deserving of maybe a higher ranking. They've just had a tough schedule, and they've lost some of these games based on a lack of offensive power. But either way, Georgia had that as a huge win. I mean, it's weird. It's like we're not giving them enough credit.
They remind me of some Alabama teams in the early Nick Saban era where, I mean, they really were not. They didn't look great, but they won national championships just with great defense.
Yeah. So, look, I'm with you, and I think I know where you might be going with that. If Georgia ends up in the playoff, they very well could be the national champion.
Yeah.
There's no reason to think, and I don't know that enough people are talking about that.
They're only, let's see, only 5 straight wins away from it all.
Yeah, whatever. It's no big deal. I do think they could. Look, I think LSU is an incredibly talented team. I think they're deserving of the number 1 spot. I think Georgia could beat them in the SEC championship.
Oh, I don't have any doubt. I mean, LSU, quite frankly, does the unthinkable, and they finally beat Alabama, and since then we are picking them apart.
I know.
Their defense is no good.
Now everyone's like, oh, man, they're not a complete team. Ohio State's better. Yeah. If LSU, even if they lose the SEC championship, they're still in. There's no way the committee.
Well, again, I mean, we were thinking I don't know where I was earlier.
Who knows?
Don't know where I am right now.
Where are you?
But I mean, all these. I mean, Texas A&M mows through Georgia, beats LSU. I mean, they could literally just blow this whole thing up.
I know. At that point, you say, "There's Alabama."
Yeah.
Sort of waiting there. Alabama would need that type of chaos. Maybe not, but I think they do.
Alabama needs chaos in the Pac-12.
Yes, which could happen.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, who knows? Maybe Herm Edwards and Arizona State, do they beat Oregon? I don't know. I mean,
yeah, why not?
I'm not predicting it, but, it is funny. I said I would say all these crazy things, and I haven't said one crazy thing yet. I do think, though, that Alabama should not be counted out. I'm really interested to see even what they look like tomorrow with Mac Jones.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Alabama fans, and you're married to one, will jump on anything. I mean, if Mac Jones is 17 out of 19 tomorrow, he'll be an early candidate for the 2020 Heisman.
Right. That's true. And look, he could be. I mean, he's a smart player. He's very accurate for the most part, in very small sample size that we've seen. But, yeah, here it really is interesting. It's like A&M has a chance here to be a big factor, and Auburn has been and will be, too.
Yeah, Auburn was that team.
Yeah.
They had everyone on the schedule, and then they exit stage. Is it right or left?
I would say this would be stage left.
Okay, you're a former
But you know what's
performer.
funny? Yeah, when I was dancing and doing all those things, I never knew what stage right or stage left was myself. So oftentimes they'd say that, and I'd go to the wrong.
For those of us less theatrically inclined, what is the difference?
Well, so I think it's the way that you're looking at the stage, or the way it's not the way you're looking. It's the way that you are facing outward toward the audience.
Yeah, so I'm facing the stage right now. Stage right. So I would probably go off stage
that
right.
Way. Yeah. I think, but you know what? Someone's probably going to tweet me and say you actually had that backwards. But either way, what I would do is they would say you're exiting stage right, and so I would think I would go toward the right, and then everyone would go the other way, and I'd just have to turn around and follow them.
What's the biggest stage you've ever been on?
I actually performed at New York City Center.
Did you really?
When I was a senior in high school with the Orlando Ballet, and that was the biggest stage. It was the American Ballet Theater was there. It was for a Youth America Grand Prix Gala, and I was in the back, but I was there, and I didn't fall down.
You want to know about mine?
What?
You want to know what stage?
Yes.
Biggest stage I've ever been on. I was in children's theater in Rumpelstiltskin, and I played a tree. I kid you not.
Wait, what?
I'll never forget it.
What? Okay, what was required out of being a tree?
I mean, you basically just stand there.
Did you have a line?
No.
Well, why didn't you get a better part?
I got a better part later. I did one play as an adult.
And what were you in that?
We don't have time. But it was. You've heard me tell this story.
Well, I wanted you to tell it again.
I was in a community theater about 25 years ago, and I thought I was so good.
You were so good.
I literally believed by the final night, I would be called to Hollywood. I was so either Broadway or Hollywood. I never got a single call.
Well, they really missed it. They missed their chance. What under the sun? Here's the thing. He did get a call from Hollywood about being that tree, though.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Broadway has never been the same since. Thank you, Laura.
Rumpelstiltskin, I love him. Isn't that so funny? He just slept for all those years and then came back. Is that the story? I can't remember. Anyway, we'll ask Kirby Smart that.
Kirby Smart joining us next.
Okay.
I spoke to a group of Georgia grads at Terry College of Business this summer, and somebody asked me what's the scariest game on Georgia's schedule. Now this is in June. I said it's Texas A&M because it falls right after Auburn, and you know that Auburn is going to be even if you win, you're going to get beat up. And now not only did Georgia win against Auburn, they clinched a spot in the SEC championship game, won the East again, and now they've got to get back up to play a team that's playing their best football of the season. It will be fascinating to see the beginning of that game and what the energy level is for Georgia.
And as you look at Georgia right now, I mean, the offense has really trailed off. Now let's be honest. In the last 4 games, they played 2 of the better defenses in America.
Right.
That may be more of the reason than anything. And one game was a downpour. So I mean, you keep seeing those stats thrown around, but are they really accurate in terms of a true read?
Well, I wouldn't wade too much into it. Now, there's no question that Georgia, because of their youth at wide receiver, and if they don't have the other kid in there, the transfer from Miami, if they don't have him and Lawrence Cager, if they don't have him in there, they're a different kind of offense because the other receivers are talented but very, very young. I mean, they've been able to win that way because they've got a very good offensive line, and DeAndre Swift's a great running back, and Jake Fromm is a wonderful manager of the game. And I mean that is a very, very high compliment. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't expect them to score more than 21 or 24 points last week. I think they'll do better against Texas A&M, but that's just who Georgia is, Paul. They're not gonna average 35, 40 points a game. They're gonna beat you running the ball and beat you with that defense, which is one of the better ones we've seen at Georgia in a while.
Tony, what happens, and somebody just asked me this, Mark Kubiak, what happens if Georgia loses this game and then beats LSU, and that's assuming LSU shows up undefeated?
It'll be a sleepless night for the fans who follow Georgia because if they beat LSU and LSU's 12-1, I think LSU's getting in.
Yeah.
Because look at that body of work that LSU has, and Georgia sitting there, they would be 11-2, and they would be SEC champions. Are you guaranteed to get in at 11-2? Well, they've never put a 2-loss team in before. Would Georgia be deserving? Yes, because they're the SEC champions. But, you know, as the way this thing is set up, there's a bunch of teams, there's a bunch of one-loss teams right now who feel like they deserve in. I just think it would be a very sleepless night for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Welcome back, and it's always great to be in Athens, and it's especially great to welcome our next guest, the head football coach of the University of Georgia, Kirby Smart, on the day before the Texas A&M game. And I was just joking with Coach afterwards, what did you do to upset the SEC schedulers to have this game at a time when everyone else is taking it easy?
I guess we had our easy earlier. So I told our players today that everybody's got to grind in the SEC, and everybody's is kind of at different times. Ours is now. Yeah, and listen, you're right. I mean, you're going to play the same number of conference games, but this has always been that weekend. I think we were here last year. I think it was UMass. I can't remember. Yeah. But in trying to get ready for this game, you just came off of, I mean, by all accounts, a brutal game that we all watched, and it's kind of hard to find a more physical, draining game than going to Jordan-Hare Stadium. Yeah, it was a tough, emotional, physical game, but I'm going to be honest with you, Paul, they all are. I mean, when you look at Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, the last week's game, they're challenging and they're tough. I know you have a great wife, and I'm not going to make a big deal about it. You addressed it Monday, but you were emotional after the game, like a lot of coaches are. I'm not sure how to approach this next question, but you apologize for it, but I mean, that's what coaches do, is it not? Well, that's what some coaches do, and that's not what I want to represent. Okay. So, I mean, not that I'm perfect. I'm by far from that, and it's one of the things I know I always want to work on is my language, and it's not something I want to represent. But I was very emotional, and I was excited, and I do think that our kids on our team understand that. And listen, I've heard you in the locker room before, and that's the locker room is a sacred place. Yeah. I've also been around you outside of the locker room. I've never heard you talk like that. So that's not really When were you in the locker room? Was that when you were coaching that time?
Yeah, I'll tell you the story. So I was asked to be the head coach at the spring game, which sounds like a big deal. It really doesn't mean anything.
I remember this.
And I'm in the locker room, and Kirby is talking to the coach. Kirby's talking to the team. And I'm like, my jaw is dropping. I mean, they had just come off of a national championship, and they were dogging it in the spring game.
It was a spring game.
And you just went ballistic. And I heard a guy behind me whisper, he said, I promise you, he didn't learn that blank from me. And I turned around, and it was Nick Saban.
We get excited for our spring games in the SEC. We have coaches like you come in. I think next time we're going to let you call the plays and call the defenses too.
My team won.
You had good players.
I mean, I've got a better record than some coaches in Alabama. One never made it to the first game. But I'm really interested, though, because there's nothing you can do, but I mean, is the video got it? I mean, was it the video that got out? Was that how it happened?
Oh no, this was said after the.
Okay.
This was in the press conference.
Oh, you were in the press conference.
They asked me what I said to the players, and I was a little too honest. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to take back my my defensive view here.
Right.
Let's talk serious football for a second, Coach, because we were listening to something before we came on here, and there's always conversation about your offense, and I know you're sitting here number 4 in the country. You're 9-1, and that's what fans want. They want to be in contention at this time of the year. But talk about the offense, and certainly it has been challenged lately in big games, but you still won the games.
Yeah, first off, I don't think you have to defend your offense in this conference when you're playing the level of football that we're capable of playing. There's good defenses. I mean, the SEC is a very defensive league. When you look across the board, and I turn on tape and I get to watch it every week, there's some good defenses out there. There's some really good defensive backs, and they tend to get their hands all over you, and they let them play in our league, and that's what you look across the board and see. So we've had moments where we've really shined in third down. We've had moments we've really shined in the red area. We've had moments that we've been able to run it better than others. We haven't put that combination together, and that's what we're always looking to do. So we're trying to improve. We've had some receivers that have been out of action, in action, out of action. We've had an offensive line that's been in and out and been a little beat up, but we're trying to put a complete game together.
And in terms of what you see from A&M, I mean, much will be made tomorrow on the broadcast about you and Jimbo. Certainly, you've got a lot of roots together, similar trees, but different sides of the ball, to say the least.
I've known Jimbo for a long time. He was coaching when I played, so he knows me as a player.
Old, right? So
he's showing I'm not going to say he's old. He's just older. He's very experienced, but I've had a lot of respect for Jimbo. I learned a lot of ball from Jimbo the years that we were together at LSU, and he does an unbelievable job offensively. You see it in the way he still brings old school ball with 2-back sets, and he still opens things up, and he really coaches the quarterback well. What he's done with Kellen Mond from beginning to now is incredible.
Yeah, and there's he is. This is now toward the end of his second year, and he's always been a great coach. This one is when you would think he would be the most dangerous. He's got all these games under his belt. When you would go against him in practice, I mean, obviously there's a lot of spirit that goes into that. Does that carry over after practice?
Not usually, not after practice, but he's a fiery guy. You know, the year I was there at LSU, I was the secondary coach, and he and Will got to go head-to-head a lot, and those were a lot more fiery than I was a part of. By that time, I had left, and Jimbo stayed and went on his way, ended up at FSU. But he's always been a very good, open-minded offensive coach that does a lot of things. I mean, he really makes you defend every part of the field.
I'm sure you've heard by now, because coaches have to keep up with the weather. It's supposed to rain tomorrow. You have great experience at that from a few. First of all, I don't know how you ever dry it off from the Kentucky game. But how does that change as you meet with the team later and start? I mean, you've been planning all week, but it's here. The rain is coming. Yeah,
it's coming. It's not something that you control. So you take things out of your control. You plan. You try to prepare your team for that. We've had that news for really 3 or 4 days now. We've worked on several things to try to help with that, and a lot of times that equalizes games. It makes things, probably a little lower scoring. It makes it sometimes a one-possession game. So you got to be smart. You got to be careful in kicking situations. You got to be able to handle that, and those are all critical times. The good news is we did get to go through that in Kentucky, and it was probably a tougher environment in that it was much colder.
Yeah, I mean, you work all year. I mean, I don't know if you try to prepare for everything. You've already done that, but psychologically, does it help if there is such a thing, having spent 4 hours in a driving cold rain a month ago?
I don't know that. I don't know if that experience is going to help or not. I do know psychologically I'm comfortable to say that our kids have had to handle that ball, play in it, and exchange the ball. And defensively, we had to play in it. So, both teams will be in the same elements. Hopefully the field will be in good conditions. Who knows?
One last thing. Fans talk about what's ahead, and we all know you're heading to the SEC championship game. And I doubt seriously coaches or players think about that. But how do you just keep? I know it's a grind every week, and you're as good as I've ever heard, no matter who the opponent. But is that it's just another week? You worry about what's in front of you Saturday, and not what's 2 weeks or 8 weeks ahead?
Yeah, you can't really think about it. When you have a team the caliber of Texas A&M and you turn on their tape, it's so clear, and they have such good players at every position that you're consumed with the game plan. You're not thinking about what's down the road. You can't control that, and all we're thinking about is the next step. We're going 10 feet in front of us. The next step is the most important thing.
Well, you certainly won't deviate, because I've never heard you talk about anything else, no matter who the opponent was. So
that's the way it should be.
Well, I'm glad. I'm going to get you out of here. I'm still feel guilty. I kept you 5 minutes late in an interview a few weeks ago, so I'm getting you out of here. I don't want to get blamed anymore for making Coach Kirby Smart late. Coach, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Paul.
Always enjoy seeing you. We'll take a break. We're live in Athens. Coach Kirby Smart joining us just hours before the big game tomorrow.
I think it'd be very difficult for Auburn's offense, as great as their defense is, to match Tua and Alabama's offense. Mac Jones is a good quarterback, you know that, but this is not Arkansas. We are a 41-point favorite. This is his first game on the road as a starter, from what I remember, and this is a heck of a hostile environment, as they say, to play in. Probably one of the toughest in the conference.
Danny, I want to ask you about Auburn, because you came on here before the season and were unusually upbeat about Gus Malzahn's team. A lot of people were surprised, especially with the difficulty of Auburn's schedule. They're sitting there right now with 3 losses. If they beat Alabama, they'll finish 9-3. Pretty much where you had them.
Yeah, I said I thought they'd win 9 or 10 games on your show the last 5 years. I think when everybody's been pretty high on them. I've said they'd lose at least 3 or 4 games, and they have. And I've also said this on your show, and I still believe it. Malzahn, I think he has a good year every 6 years. This was his 6th year. And this is the best preseason team I've seen him have in 6 years.
You've heard all the criticism. I mean, I'm on all these shows, and everybody wants to say Alabama hasn't played anyone. Their defense isn't elite. But, I'm not trying to use the Vegas line as anything other than what it is, and we all know what it is, but there's still this perception out there that Alabama is a really good football team.
They're better than a really good football team. They're one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country, and you have an interesting situation, as you know. If Alabama should beat Auburn, what happens if Georgia loses to LSU? I know what I would do. And if you're trying to pick the best 4 teams in the country, I would put Alabama in there. I can't think. Oregon's certainly a good team. Utah's a good team. Alabama, Georgia, LSU, they'd crush Oregon or Utah. It'd be like a 2-touchdown favorite, I would think. And maybe not 2 touchdowns. I know Clemson would be. Ohio State would be. LSU probably would be too. They'd be a substantial favorite over those 2 teams. So give me another team. Oklahoma, not that they wouldn't have a chance, but they're probably better than Oregon and Utah, but they're not in the same breath, or they shouldn't be, as Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, and Georgia.
This is the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
Welcome back. It's been a great day here in Georgia. Kirby Smart spending some time with us before the big game tomorrow. Mike Griffith will join us next. Have a good opportunity to visit with him. Let's get back to the calls. And Harold is calling next. Good afternoon, Harold. How are you?
Hey, Paul. Nothing against Sweet Home Alabama, but I actually prefer Poncho and Lefty. But
That's a good song.
Yeah. I love hearing Kirby Smart. If you look forward, you're looking at my office. Although I live about 3 blocks up the hill. But if you look behind, I have a research proposal to you, Paul.
Okay.
The building behind you is called the I don't know. It's some research library, but they ask for scholars and residents, and what I want you to do is send me your resume because I want you to be the next scholar and resident. The fellow that was talking to you earlier, I think we could put together a research proposal, Paul, about stadium evolution, the size of the stadiums. Because I know personally in Athens, oh my God, the way the stadium has evolved, and we all blame it on Herschel. But
by the way, I would love to accept your opportunity to be a scholar in residence. I've been considering academia for some time, and this might be my.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And then what the setup would be, Paul, is I also get asked to do freshman seminars. So you and I could do a freshman seminar, and God, I've already written it in, and my mom complains about my handwriting, but it was
better than
what
mine.
What you and I would talk about is irrational fans. Yeah.
That would be. Listen, I'm in. I can start. I can start Monday.
Well, no. You got to go through your fall stuff.
Okay.
But I was thinking, this is usually it's a couple of years in advance, Paul.
Okay.
It's kind of like those.
Well, let's talk about it.
If you and I could do this freshman seminar, and the one thing I want to do, I think I've told you, and I have my friend Neil Williamson. You probably know him from Hondo.
Of course.
He and I have been looking at the railroad tracks, and I've been thinking about doing a whole thing where I'm going to go back through and figure out. And you probably don't know it, but we used to spend the night on the tracks, and when we beat Bear Bryant, I told you 21-0. But you and I could get together. We could do the freshman seminar. You could Okay, now, again, I would have to give you a little bit of money because I'm sure the university ain't going to give you none. But.
No, Harold, if I got into academia, it would be out of the love of helping young people. It wouldn't be for the money.
Well, that's what we all say, but, yeah, you never know.
Well, no, I do know.
You, Paul,
I'm really I'm interested in doing something
Paul,
worthwhile.
Can I tell you one thing that came to my mind? I was on my bike ride up in Helen, Georgia today.
Okay.
And I heard that you guys are going to give a prize for like some best poster. Yeah,
on SEC Nation.
Yeah. So I'm not an artist, and I had all those things about Marcus Spears, and because I hate Florida, I was not going to say anything about Tim Tebow, and then your other buddy Marty Party. But here's my poster. If I could have made it. It is Paul is fine, but Laura is the bomb.
Wow, that's incredible, Harold. We got a deal, Harold. Call my people, and they'll call you back.